First, I would like to acknowledge and thank Yale for their support and sponsorship of this morning's breakfast. We welcome Yale as a part of Menus of Change as a provider of a protein alternative that is plant-based. Thank you to Yale. I'm Kathy Jörin, the Senior Director of the School of Graduate and Professional Studies here at the Culinary Institute of America, and I have the pleasure of giving you a brief update on our master's degree programs this morning. But before I tell you about these, here are a couple of housekeeping items related to today's summit. First is a reminder that presentations and demonstration recipes are available in the conference program app. They're attached to each session so that you can follow along during the sessions. Today's programming includes topics around plant-forward and plant-based foods and associated science and technology, cultural diversity, nutrition science, food policy, net zero commitments, consumer engagement, and more. This morning's schedule includes 2 general sessions, followed by a networking break. After that, our first round of breakout sessions will take place in various locations, and staff will be strategically posted to direct you. At the conclusion of the breakout sessions, lunchboxes will be available for pickup in the Beverage Garden Plaza, where the reception took place last night. Desserts and book signings will take place in the lobby on the lower level here, just before the 3 afternoon general sessions, which will be followed by the second round of breakout sessions. And the day will conclude with another reception in the Beverage Garden. Another full day to enjoy. Okay, so now to the CIA's master programs. The CIA has been delivering master's degrees since fall of 2018, and as of this year, I'm pleased to announce that we have 3 master's degrees. All of these programs are 30-credit Master of Professional Studies degrees with a combined emphasis on academics and practical learning. Each program is cohort-based, 2 years long, and primarily online, with 2 to 3 short residencies based on the CIA campuses. They are all designed as executive-type programs for working professionals who want to earn an advanced degree from their home location while continuing with their work and personal lives. All programs culminate with the development and presentation of a capstone project intended to have a positive impact on our food system. The Master in Food Business is a one-of-a-kind business degree program with a food industry focus. This degree is an excellent fit for an entrepreneur looking to open a restaurant or other food service business, or for an innovator who wants to launch a new food product, or for those wishing to further their understanding of the business of food to better contribute to an organization or to move up within a company. Learners in this program endeavor to shape the future of food through business opportunities. A hallmark of this program is that it is primarily taught by practicing industry professionals. Cohort 3 will graduate in August, and we will admit Cohort 5 in fall 2022. It's my pleasure to tell you that Cohort 4 is here this week, attending their second residency, which includes participation in this Menus of Change conference and summit. You all know how influential this summit is, so it won't surprise you that master's students who attended previously told me that they needed to completely update their business concept after attending this conference. The current cohort is joined by a number of graduates from Cohort 2 who graduated last August, but have elected to come to the summit in person this year since they had to participate virtually last year. I'd like to ask the current cohort of master's students, along with the attending alumni, to quickly stand up and be recognized. Thank you. I'm so proud of all of them. Okay. Next, we have a Master of Professional Studies, which has evolved from the Beverage Graduate Certificate program that we delivered for several years in Napa Valley. The current Master's in Wine and Beverage Management is a unique master's degree that not only takes you from vine to bottle, but also emphasizes how wine makes its way to the table, covering the life cycle of a bottle from marketing to distribution and from restaurants to retail. It is a program with unparalleled breadth and depth in beverage education that includes not only extensive tastings, but also a number of beverage-focused business courses. And tastings are facilitated through the residencies and through a special partnership with an organization called Master the World, which creates customized wine tasting kits, which are shipped directly to the learners. It's a perfect degree for those people looking to add a beverage specialization to their credentials, for current beverage professionals looking to advance, or for people who want a potential career change. Our inaugural online cohort has just completed their first year, and we will welcome a second cohort in September. Our third and newest program is the Masters in Sustainable Food Systems, launching this fall. The CIA is uniquely qualified to deliver this program, which focuses on the sustainability of our food system through a culinary lens. Topics include impacts of climate change, sustainable agriculture, diets and public health, social justice, advocacy and activism, leadership, and more. The design of this program benefits from the expertise of an external advisory council of experienced industry leaders, several of which are participating in this conference. Current and future leaders committed to leading organizations into the future in terms of sustainability in the world of food are a perfect fit for this program. These are learners who think about careers in agriculture as managers of corporate sustainability programs, supply chain managers, innovators, product developers, and those who are educators or who are interested in policy work. Our first cohort for this program will be admitted in this fall. Also pertinent to this program is that it is supported in part by the CIA's collaboration with Google. Thank you for allowing me to share these, what I think are exciting developments. I hope you think so too, and encourage you to consider joining one of our programs or referring your colleagues to join, and hope that you can generally spread the word to your networks of professionals who would benefit from being a part of impacting the much needed change in our industry. More information can be found at our ciachef.edu/masters website. Okay, now it is my pleasure to introduce our next general session. It's called Plant Forward, Plant-Based, the Business and Technology of Industry Change. Kate Cox is the moderator of this session. Kate is a food journalist and former editor-in-chief of The Counter, an award-winning independent nonprofit newsroom covering food at the intersection of politics, culture, business, and health. Kate is currently engaged in her new interest, newsroom development, working to make journalism more humane for journalists. Please welcome Kate to the stage to lead a discussion with our panelists.
Thank you. Good morning. This is the first time I've been in front of a room of people this big in a minute, so I'm really delighted to make my entry back into reality at CIA, and I'm so glad to see all of you. It's weird to be introduced by what I used to do, which was edit The Counter, but if you were a reader, since we just folded a month ago, thank you for being one. Thank you for keeping us engaged and giving us great stories to tell, and I hope you'll come and say hello. We're going to start today with 3 different experts who will get us into the conversation about what I like to call the plant-based boom, because when I started to cover food and agriculture 15 years ago, we called it a trend, which is a word I hate, and also it's ephemeral. So let's call it a boom because that's what it is. And in this session, you're going to get a detailed understanding of the science behind sustainable alternatives, the industry's aspirations, and that eternal moving target, the eater, and how their attitudes and beliefs about alternative proteins are changing, and how we adapt to that. Then I want to encourage you to bring your curiosity to our breakout session in Classroom 4 on the conference level, where we'll be joined with a couple of other guests, Mike Messersmith from Oatly and Jennifer DiFrancesco from Sodexo and the Humane Society, to talk about how we emerge from this present moment, because we're not having this conversation in a vacuum. There may be a plant-based boom, but there is also a hot mess out the door in the supply chain. So we want to talk a little bit about that, and also about the tension between high-tech innovations like lab-grown meat or cultivated protein, and minimally processed plant-based foods. I can tell you from having covered this sector for a while that readers devoured our coverage on alternative proteins, but they often didn't fully understand the nuances of each category. So I hope we'll be able to tease that out a little bit today. And then we need you to weigh in with your questions so we can keep it lively. The floor will be totally open. It'll be informal and more of a back and forth discussion than presentations. So you can finally ask an expert what the bioeconomy is, or if you really need to know whether Gen Z is going to go for alt proteins like cultivated meat, we can get into that. And I hope you'll join us for that. So let's start, though, with our first expert, Marie Molde, trend analyst from Datassential and member of the Menus of Change Business Leadership Council, with some findings to share from the 2022 Plant Forward Opportunity Report. Marie.
Great. Well, thank you, Kate. And gosh, it is such a pleasure and an honor to kick off our sessions this morning with something Allison teased out yesterday at the introduction to the conference that we very excitingly, I think just today, have launched on the Menus of Change website what is the third installation of our Plant Forward Opportunities report. So maybe some of you in the audience are familiar with this report and have read it in previous years. This one, I think, is our largest yet. This report is, I want to say, 60 slides this year. And we've really developed it for you all. So our hope is that this report will serve as a tool for you to take back to your organizations and really help make the case for why Plant Forward is such a big opportunity and really highlight what consumers want, what they want to see from the food industry, and what their goals are. So we really hope that following this conference, you will take a broader look at the report and bring it back to your organizations. And ahead of that, I'm excited to share highlights with you all this morning. So, oh yes, I need to click this way. Let's start by talking about how consumers eat today. So baseline foundation, Americans, what different types of foods are we eating? So I don't think it's any surprise to most of us that most Americans identify as being meat eaters. So according to our data, 71% of us eat meat. That being said, there is a growing group of flexitarian consumers. So today, it's 22% of us are eating in a flexitarian manner. So not eliminating meat from our diet, but just focusing on eating more plant-based foods. And then, you know, it is a small group of people who are vegans or vegetarians. It's 2 or 3% of people. But what we thought was quite interesting as we dove further into this data is that quite a large chunk of consumers today are limiting meat consumption in some way. So if you add up the sum total of flexitarians, pescatarians, vegans, and vegetarians, it's almost 1 in 3 consumers are limiting their meat consumption today. So that's a really powerful finding. And it actually gets even more powerful or a stronger statistic if we look just at the younger generations. So with Gen Z consumers today, 36% of them are limiting meat in their diet. So we'll talk a lot more about this and really how Plant Forward. It's of interest to all of us, but it's really the students of today and the Gen Z consumers and the millennial consumers who are really driving this forward. We'll also look at the different protein types available to us, and when we ask consumers, which of these are you eating on a daily basis, meat is that #1 protein that consumers eat every day. So a quarter of us are eating meat daily, but there are some interesting differences if we look at this by age group. So let's see, millennials here are in this green trend curve, and millennials and Gen Z are our biggest consumers of meat and animal proteins on a daily basis, but millennials specifically are the biggest consumers of plant-based proteins, so nuts and legumes and plant-based analogs. And then students are actually, and we thought this was quite an interesting finding in this report overall, that students are that consumer group who actually report highest consumption of all the different protein types on a daily basis. So, students are ahead of Gen Z overall here, and this could suggest that maybe this combination of age and education leads consumers to want to consume more protein. I think that we all know that protein is such an important macronutrient to really all consumers today. We all, I think, eat more of it than we need, and students and younger consumers especially are consuming a lot of protein, but there still are aspirations to consume even more, especially when it comes to plant-based protein. But younger consumers and students are also looking to consume more fish and seafood, which is also wonderful to see. Here's two the largest gaps in consumption between students and the general population is with poultry and plant-based substitutes, so plant-based meats or plant-based eggs. There's a 14 percentage point gap there between students and the general population. So those are really the protein categories where students are especially consuming more than when it comes to the average person. All right, so consumption desires overall. We wanted to know, we have a baseline now. We know what types of proteins and ingredients you're eating every day. But when it comes to sort of future outlook or aspirations on what you want to increase or decrease in your diet, what does that look like? So today, 14% of us are interested in increasing our meat consumption. So that, I think, again, harkens back to, we hear a lot about protein. We know that it's important for building muscle and helping us be healthy and things like that. So 14% of consumers are looking to increase meat today, but that is down by 6% even compared to just last year. So there is a chunk of people who want to increase meat, but it is quite small and it is decreasing. And then for the other animal protein categories, there are a few more consumers who want to eat more poultry, and there are about a quarter of us who want to increase fish and seafood. But then we look at the plant-based categories like vegetables and fruits and whole grains and nuts and nut butters. And those plant-based categories surpass all of the animal proteins as far as being items that we want to increase in our diets. It's especially true for vegetables and fruits, which I think is wonderful to see. 57% of Americans are interested in increasing produce in their diets. And that, again, is an even stronger statistic when we look to students specifically. I think it's 7 in 10 students are trying to increase fruits and vegetables in their diets today. And then even just compared to last year, so 2022 to 2021, we saw an increase in desire to increase almost all of these plant-based categories, with the exception of whole grains. Also taking a second to talk about dairy. So we have reason to believe that we are starting to see a shift or a potential shift away from dairy consumption. So 15% of consumers are looking to increase dairy in their diets today, but that has decreased by 6% compared to last year. So that is going down. Whereas compared to non-dairy substitutes, so things like your almond milks or your oat milks or vegan cheeses and things like that, a quarter of Americans are looking to increase those plant-based substitutes, and that's up compared to last year. And then with Datassential's menus database, we can tell that plant-based milks and alternative milks and cheeses and things are also really growing on restaurant menus. So this chart here is showing double-digit or triple-digit or exponential growth when it comes to oat milk presence on restaurant menus. So these options are really increasing. one thing I want to mention is we're also seeing a huge increase in allergies across all age groups today. So certainly that's a part of this, driving consumers from traditional dairy to a plant-based option. Looking at Gen Z consumers, 41% of them say that they consume a plant-based milk daily or weekly, and about the same percent, 42% of Gen Z consumers say they never consume dairy milk. So I'm a millennial. When I think about that change from generation to generation, there really has been quite a huge shift. And when you compare the consumer desires to the menu data, we really believe this trend is going to continue. All right, so this year in our report, we dove deeper into climate change and the climate crisis than we have before in previous iterations of the report. And we wanted to first understand who is our group of climate-concerned consumers? Who among us says that they are concerned about the climate, either very much, or I guess our question here was view climate change as extremely or very important? And we found that 55% of consumers agree with that. So a majority of consumers are concerned about what's going on with our climate right now. And that's especially true when it comes to students and meat limiters. So we saw early on that a big chunk of us, 1 in 3 or so, is looking to limit meat. When it comes to that group of consumers and our students, those folks are especially concerned about the climate. And we also had a really big question of, do consumers associate their food choices with the climate crisis? Like, do we understand that every time we sit down to a meal, we have a chance to impact the health of our planet in some way? And our data and our study here found that that's really understood. So 65% of consumers believe that we can mitigate climate change by the food choices that we're making. So we were really glad to see this here, that there really is that association, that maybe it's not so easy for all of us to totally eliminate plastics or drive an electric car or something like that, but we get that if we make thoughtful choices when it comes to food and beverage, that can have an impact on the health of our planet. And then I think consumers are also seeing the climate crisis and associations with our food and beverage choices really in a holistic way when it comes to the climate and the health of the planet. So consumers are thinking about the livelihoods of people who rely on agriculture, like our farmers, and how their lives are impacted by climate change. They're thinking about water and the energy it takes to grow food. And they're also saying that, yes, overall, the food choices that I make are having an impact on the health of our planet. And then another finding that really stood out to us, of course, the report is mostly focused on food and beverage and plant-based and plant-forward dining, but something that really continued to pop was packaging, and the importance of packaging and how that is coming into the consideration set of consumers when they're making sustainable food choices. So the majority of the population, 77% of us, is associating packaging and the material used in packaging as something that makes an impact on the environment, and that was particularly true for some groups especially. So those climate-concerned consumers who are worried about the health of our planet, high-income households, and students especially are thinking about packaging. So although, of course, those of us in the room were focused on food and beverage and flavor and things like that, we have to think about packaging too, because our consumers are thinking about that. All right, segue into health and nutrition perceptions when it comes to plant-based foods. So we know in previous years, doing this report and our conversations together at Menus of Change, we know that we have a problem where consumers aren't thinking of plant-based proteins as healthy and as complete as animal-based proteins, or at least not all of the time. There's this fear that they're not going to be as satiating, as filling, they're not as good for us, things like that. So we wanted to see sort of what the baseline is right now. Do you believe plant-based protein to be just as healthy as animal-based protein. And right now, today, it's about half of consumers believe that to be true. So 48% for healthy and 46% for complete. But that statistic is a lot higher if we look at some of our core consumer groups again. So those meat limiters and those students really do believe that plant-based protein is healthy and it's complete. We don't need to maybe pair it with an animal protein to get a complete product. But then you can see if you look at someone like a daily meat eater, they're not quite there. That group needs a bit more convincing that these plant-based proteins are just as healthful and just as complete. So we also wanted to understand with health and immunity benefits. So I think most of us know that we've seen this increased interest in immunity and nutrition with what we've been through during the pandemic. People are looking to functional foods and they want foods to bring us specific health benefits. So we wanted to understand, in the realm of plant-based foods, what benefits are most appealing to consumers. So some of it is more energy and stamina, some of it is protection from getting sick, some of it is beauty, supporting healthy skin or healthy hair or bone health. But when it comes to the top 3 interests, so the top 3 health and immunity benefits people look for from plant-based foods, the number 3 is help in losing weight. So I was sort of curious demographically, is there any particular consumer who especially wants this? Maybe there are some guesses out there. It's actually younger consumers are most interested in this kind of weight loss element of plant-based foods, that they can help us in a pursuit to lose weight. The number 2 area of interest is protection from long-term disease. So I'd like to note the difference here that further down this list is protection from getting sick, and then higher up is this notion of protection from long-term disease. And I think that suggests that consumers are looking to plant-based foods with a longer runway in mind. So it's not that I'm choosing a plant-based or plant-forward choice to avoid getting a cold tomorrow. There is some of that, but more so it's this notion of I want to choose plant-based because I want this long-term runway of health in my life. And the number 1 health and immunity benefit that consumers want from plant-based foods is supporting digestive health. So this idea of the health of our gut, we think that consumers are really understanding today more than ever before that our gut is associated with our immunity. We hear that our gut is our largest immune organ. We know that it's important to keep our microbiomes healthy, and we want to eat fiber and plant-based foods and prebiotics and things like that. So this is the number 1 benefit that's true for all generations, that people really want this support with digestive health. I think I'm running short on time, so I'll buzz through the rest of this. What's holding consumers back from plant-based foods? This is the same as it's been in previous years of our report, that the number 1 issue is taste. We know that we need the chefs in the room to deliver really delicious plant-based foods. Otherwise, consumers aren't going to choose these options. Cost and texture are the other 2 top concerns. When it comes to restaurant choices specifically, we saw that again. So taste is the number 1 concern, paying too much is number 2, and we thought this was interesting. So this idea of concerns that plant-based or plant-forward options are too processed, that's not really a concern, especially when it comes to restaurants. So only 18% of consumers are thinking about that, and especially it's not something super top of mind for that Gen Z consumer. And then what are the opportunities for,
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to do this, but let this be a lesson for everyone who is speaking today. They really care about time here.
Okay.
We're going to wrap you on opportunities, but find Marie after to talk about that, and opportunities is the most important one. Thank you. Sorry to be the gatekeeper there. Next, we have Stephanie von Stein. From Good Food Institute, or GFI, as many of us know it. She is Senior Associate Director of International Engagement at the Good Food Institute, and she's going to cover some findings from one of GFI's State of the Industry reports, which were released in April. Stephanie.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So yes, I am Stephanie von Stein from the Good Food Institute. Thank you very much for having me today. It's exciting to present some of the results of our recent State of the Industry reports to this group of future chefs and food industry professionals and nutrition specialists. So let me get started. I neglected to find out how to advance the slides. Help. Oh, no. Okay, here we go. So first I'm going to give you an introduction to basically what are the three categories of alternative proteins that we work on at GFI. And then I'll go over some of the latest industry developments. I'm going to focus on fermentation-derived and cultivated meat, eggs, dairy, and seafood because my colleague Rachel Dreskin from the Plant-Based Food Association is going to do a deep dive into plant-based. Then I'm going to go over some of the challenges we're seeing in the industry at the next phase as we seek to scale up, and then share what we know about consumer acceptance of the categories. Here, all right, there we go. I will get this soon. So first of all, my name is Stephanie von Stein. I'm the Senior Associate Director for International Engagement at the Good Food Institute, where I work closely with our colleagues across the world in 5 international affiliate organizations. We have organizations in Asia Pacific, India, Israel, Europe, and Brazil. So what is the Good Food Institute? We are a global nonprofit think tank reimagining protein production. We work with scientists, policymakers, innovators, and corporations to advance the science, policy, and markets for alternative proteins globally. We deliver all of our services free of charge and publish a range of open access research to benefit a range of stakeholders. So first, for plant-based proteins, I am not sure what's wrong with my fingers. Here. Can you help? Thank you. Here we go. Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you. So anyway, first of all, plant-based proteins. Plant-based meat is designed to be indistinguishable from animal meat. Like animal-based meat, plant-based meat is composed of protein, fat, vitamins, minerals, and water. But it has a better macronutrient profile than conventional meat. It has complex carbs and fiber, and it has less fat and cholesterol. And the best thing is we don't need to raise, feed, slaughter, and transport animals to make plant-based meat. Cultivated meat is meat derived from the cells of animals. Cultivated meat provides the same sensory and nutritional profiles as conventional meat because it comprises the same cell types and three-dimensional structure as meat from an animal. It isn't imitation or synthetic meat. It's actual animal meat grown outside of the animal. If you're interested in learning more about the process of making cultivated meat, we have a lot of explainers on our website, and I encourage you to take a look at those. Turning to fermentation. Fermentation is an ancient technology in food production. Ancient civilizations used fermentation to make alcohol, to preserve foods, and to increase the nutritional profile of foods. Sauerkraut, kimchi, and tempeh are examples of traditionally fermented food products. Over the last century, the uses of fermentation have really expanded in the food industry. And over the last couple of years, we've seen fermentation really arise as an enabling technology in alternative proteins. With fermentation, you can program microorganisms like fungi, yeast, or bacteria to express proteins and fats, animal proteins and fats. And also you can program them to generate proteins and use them as a whole biomass source of protein, like in the Meatless brand corn. So let me tell you about why we work on alternative proteins at GFI. Why make a whole organization of 150 people across 6 continents just to advance the alternative protein industry? Good question. Well, it turns out that alternative proteins really address a lot of the most pressing problems that we're facing today on the planet. Conventional animal agriculture contributes 20% of global greenhouse gases. It also uses 75% of agricultural land while only contributing 33% of our protein supply. And it is the #1 user of medically important antibiotics. Actually, antibiotics could become obsolete in our lifetimes just because of animal agriculture uses of antibiotics. With alternative proteins, we can make all of the meats, eggs, dairy, and seafood that people love in a more sustainable and efficient way. Fortunately, the alternative protein industry is taking off. From a baseline, this is from our State of the Industry reports released in 2021. From a baseline of investment in 2010 of $500 million across all categories of alternative proteins, in 2021, we saw $5 billion invested across the 3 categories that I'm talking about. That's a 60% increase over 2020, where we saw $3.1 billion invested. And note in particular the explosive growth in cultivated meat investment, as you can see in the blue segment of the bar graph. And here's a visual of the results of all of that investment. As you can see, there are over 1,000 plant-based brands in the United States alone, generating $7.4 billion in sales last year. The cultivated and fermented segments are more nascent with limited products on shelves, and yet we saw 107 companies in the cultivated protein space by the end of 2021, and 88 companies in the fermented protein space. Those fermented protein companies are distributed across the globe. The U.S. is the dominant player with 30 fermented protein companies, followed by Israel with 9, and Germany and Spain with 4 each. Last year, we saw fermentation-derived products across all categories, expanding from ground meat products, whole-cut products, meat, eggs, dairy, seafood, fats, and oils. In the future, we won't see the 3 categories of alternative proteins as distinct categories, but rather as one large industry where each technologies from each of the segments will be adopted across the different technologies. So we will see plant-based end products infused with fermentation-derived and cultivated fats and oils and flavorings. We'll see cultivated end products grown on fermentation-derived growth media, and so on. Right now, cultivated meat is only approved for sale in Singapore, but we expect additional approvals across the world, possibly as soon as the end of 2022 in the United States. So the problem right now is the price, right? So we need to scale production. Right now, we're expecting to see the first products that hit the shelves in the United States to really be blended into plant-based and whole biomass products to enhance flavor and textures. So that will be the first way that many of us will experience cultivated meat products. As I alluded to, we are seeing a looming shortage in bioprocessing capacity across the 2 technologies. Starting with fermentation, a baseline commercial fermentation production plant that can produce 10 tons per batch is estimated to cost between $150 million and $400 million. And forecasts of demand indicate that we'll need 3 orders of magnitude more fermentation capacity than is currently available on the planet. Another challenge is the feed. We need to optimize the feed and make it less expensive. So a lot of R&D funding is going to be required to lower the cost of feed for fermentation. On the cultivated side, and again, a lack of infrastructure for bioprocessing. A baseline cultivated meat production plant that can produce 10 kilotons of minced meat annually is estimated to cost between $250 million and $450 million. And it will require 100 of these to meet just 0.3% of global meat demand by 2030. That would be a total of $25 billion required for investment. And we are hoping to get to price parity, which we're saying is around $2.57 per pound. So again, a lot of scale up is going to be required to reach price parity so that these products can be competitive with conventional meat. Before I turn to consumer acceptance, I just wanted to tell you a little bit more about kind of where I specialize, which is on the international side and what governments are doing. So interestingly enough, a lot of governments are starting to understand the value proposition of these technologies and are investing in them, in the infrastructure and in the R&D. They understand that these are food security solutions as well as lowering greenhouse gas emissions. So I can talk to you more in the breakout session about the different initiatives that are going on globally on that front. Okay, so as food industry professionals, consumer acceptance is, of course, your foremost concern. Because of the limited products available for sale in the fermented category, there are very few consumer acceptance studies yet in that category. However, last year, a Berlin-based fermented cheese company did conduct a large survey of 5,000 consumers, which indicated promising levels of acceptance of fermentation-derived dairy products. In fact, 79% of the consumers polled were willing to try, and 70% were willing to buy fermentation-derived cheese. So that was an interesting finding. On the cultivated side, we know of 5 studies, which we've also published in our Cultivated State of the Industry report, published in April. So 5 of those studies, the results are in that report. There's an interesting highlight, the US-UK cultivated meat acceptance study, which revealed promising levels of consumer acceptance, or at least interest in trying cultivated products, with 87% of Gen Z and millennials willing to try cultivated meat, followed by 77% of Gen Xers and 74% of baby boomers. So that was good news. To sum up, briefly, we're seeing an exploding level of interest in alternative proteins. Next year and the year after, we expect to see a lot more products in the whole biomass category, as well as plant-based products, which are blended with cultivated and fermented ingredients to enhance flavorings. We're seeing promising levels, especially in the younger generations, of consumer acceptance of these products. And finally, I wanted to say, just again, we are an organization dedicated to advancing the markets for alternative proteins globally. So as we like to say, we can have our meat and have our planet too. If you'd like to get in touch with us to learn more about any aspect of alternative proteins, I've listed a few of the key contacts here. And our State of the Industry reports are just chock full of information on all 3 categories. So I hope you'll get in touch. Thank you very much.
Stephanie, thank you for that. So we'll finish here with our expert insights with Rachel Dreskin, Stephanie's colleague at GFI. She's also CEO of the Plant-Based Foods Association and the newly formed Plant-Based Foods Institute. She's going to talk to you about the plant-based shopper, where they're living, what they're thinking, and also domestic sourcing opportunities. Rachel, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good to be here. Wonderful to connect with so many passionate people at this conference. Thank you to the previous presenters, Marie and Stephanie, and to the organizers of this conference. What a terrific event. And it's my third year being here, and I can't wait to come back. It's a lot of fun being here. So I'm going to dive right in. So the Plant-Based Foods Association is the trade association in the U.S. representing the interests of the plant-based foods industry and our members. And this is an organization that was founded by the industry for the industry. So back in 2016, 5 visionary leaders, executives of plant-based food companies, came together with the founding executive director, Michelle Simon, and said, we need to create a trade association that is addressing the challenges that we collectively are feeling as an industry. So that was why the organization was founded, and it still is a big part of the organization today, looking at how do we defend the plant-based foods industry and our members. We also have expanded into a lot of proactive work as well. So now you'll see we are here to champion, we are here to strengthen and elevate our members in addition to defending their interests. So membership is at the core of the work that we do. We have over 350 members now, and we also position ourselves as the voice of the plant-based foods industry and our interests. And we have 2 main program areas. One is policy, which was a central focus from the beginning, which is really focused on leveling the playing field for plant-based food brands. We heard a lot of great insights around policy yesterday, but plant-based food brands have had a lot of unique challenges. For example, with labeling their products with commonly understood terminology like meat, milk, eggs, etc. And it makes it more difficult for those companies to compete if there are severe restrictions. So we're very active on the policy side. And then we also have a program that is focused on the marketplace. How do we increase the availability and accessibility of plant-based foods through retail, through e-commerce, and through food service, with a goal to not only increase the quantity, but also the assortment, the diversity of plant-based foods. Now, as Kate mentioned, we also recently launched a sister organization to the Plant-Based Foods Association, and this is called the Plant-Based Foods Institute. So this is a charity organization that sits along PBFA to drive transformation to a plant-based food system that benefits people, the planet, and animals. And through the Institute, we really think about what are the research gaps, what needs to be conducted, and then we will take on some of that research ourselves in order to then best position our members out of the association to be able to identify what are the strategies that we can incubate that will allow the companies that are part of our association and part of the plant-based foods industry to really drive forward that transformative change within the industry. And these 2 organizations, PBFA and the Institute, are under an umbrella, a vision umbrella. And that vision is a world where values and business interests harmonize to create a plant-based food system that respects the dignity and health of all living beings and the planet. And what do we mean by a plant-based food system? A food system that's based on plants for direct human consumption? Yes. But we also are taking a systems lens to this and go a bit further when we define what that ideal food system looks like, which is a food system that respects the rights of animals to live free of exploitation, ensures fairness for farmers and workers. Farmers was brought up yesterday. Very, very grateful for that. That is central to the focus of the two associations. It also promotes good health and nutrition and is restorative and remains within ecological limits. Now, this is not new to this group, but just to kind of ground us on why do we need this transformative shift in our food system? It's, of course, necessary from an environmental impact standpoint. We need to shift to this system in order to reduce GHGs, to reduce eutrophication and biodiversity loss. It's also, of course, central to human health. Plant-based foods are central to healthy and nutritious diets, are crucial to preventing future zoonotic disease, and to protect the efficacy of our medically important antibiotics, which Stephanie just spoke about. Our antibiotics are getting close to losing their efficacy. The World Health Organization estimates that by 2050, more people are going to die from antibiotic-resistant bacteria than from cancer. And of course, globally, 80% of our medically important antibiotics are for the animal agriculture industry. In the US, that's 70%. So a large proportion of our medically important antibiotics are going into the food system, specifically animal agriculture. And also, from a social justice standpoint, a transition to a plant-based food system has the potential to ensure equity and justice across the food system. Now, I'm going to, because Stephanie spoke about cultivated meats and about fermentation, I'm going to dig in a little bit more on plant-based and this boom of plant-based that we have seen in recent years. So you'll see in 2018, sales of plant-based foods were $4.8 billion. Fast forward to 2021, we just released our new 2021 retail sales data with our friends at GFI and SPINS, and we now are seeing retail sales of $7.4 billion for plant-based foods. So that is obviously very tremendous growth over the past few years. And I also want to note, too, that this data takes into account those alternative products that are looking to replace their traditional animal-based counterpart. So this is not including whole fruits and vegetables. This is really those replacement products. And this slide speaks to the diversity in the industry. We are tracking now 15 categories of plant-based foods. You'll see that milk continues to lead the way with $2.6 billion in annual retail sales, but you'll also see that consumers are not just interested in milk. Milk is oftentimes, plant-based milk is the gateway to consumers trying plant-based foods. But of course, consumers are now trying plant-based meats, but not only just meats, but butters, cheeses, yogurts, condiments, dressing, meals, and also plant-based eggs, you'll see in 2021 have increased sales by 42%. So this is representative of consumers not just looking to have plant-based milk with their coffee or a plant-based burger at a barbecue, but they're really looking to integrate plant-based options into all eating opportunities throughout the day. Now, I also want to touch on just a few years ago, in these categories, plant-based food barely made a blip on the radar. Virtually 100% of sales across these categories were animal-based. Now, plant-based represents 4% dollar share of total category sales. And that is a 79% growth, three-year dollar share growth. Now, I mentioned milk. I want to dig into milk for just another moment. So milk is certainly a driver within this category of plant-based foods, but also is a growth driver now in the industry. And plant-based milk is actually now making up for losses in the animal-based milk category. So you'll see in 2021, animal-based milk sales were down 2%. Plant-based milk sales up 4%. And so that means that plant-based milk is actually the growth driver for the milk industry now. And I also want to point out that this is something that's not just on the fringes anymore. This is something that now 62% of households are purchasing plant-based foods. And it's not that consumers are just purchasing a plant-based product and then saying, oh, I tried it, it's all right, and then don't go back and buy it again. We're seeing a repeat rate of 79%. So consumers are trying plant-based foods and then they're going back again and again to try more. And why do consumers choose plant-based foods? The number one driver is health. So you'll see here 36% of consumers are purchasing plant-based foods because of the health benefits. Also, consumers are trying to eat more plants. They're trying to eat less meat. And then you'll see below that animal welfare, planetary health, and then social justice are also motivators to a lesser degree. And who is this plant-based shopper? So this I love because this is from 2020, but it shows that the sales growth across the 4 census regions of the US is between 26 and 29%. So there is tremendous growth across all areas of the US. And I also want to point out, if you see in the South, the sales growth is up 2.3 billion in the South. That is the highest out of any of the 4 census regions. And this is important because this dispels the myth that the plant-based shoppers are along the coastal region of the US. Now, this is a very rosy picture that I've painted for plant-based foods, but there is also tremendous volatility going on in the plant-based food industry and the food industry and virtually every industry overall. As Kate said before, it's really a hot mess out there. And I know all the brands in the room can certainly attest to that. So we are also looking at ways for how can we increase the resilience of supply networks within the plant-based foods industry and for our members. So we have recently launched our domestic sourcing initiative. This is out of the Institute, and it connects our plant-based food companies with domestic supply partners, such as farmers, the processors, the ingredient suppliers, and the manufacturers. And this really seeks to create those collaborative opportunities for American farmers and for rural communities and economies. And from a company perspective, this is an attractive thing to look at because looking at shortening those supply networks, building more resilience into supply networks, focusing on agricultural practices in their supply networks that are more sustainable, that are more resilient, more regenerative. And then also the opportunity for the farmer is that this is a thriving, growing industry. And we need to be thinking about what are the opportunities that we need to be presenting and connecting with our farmers on. So this opportunity also to grow plants that are in demand of the plant-based food industry creates more crop diversification. It promotes sustainability while ensuring agriculture remains profitable. And then lastly, we are going to take these connections between farmers, rural communities, and the plant-based food brands and leverage this within our policy work to demonstrate these profitable opportunities. What are the economic, what are the ecosystem benefits of creating this thriving domestic sourcing networks and also the benefits for the local and rural economies as well, or communities. And lastly, I am going to end on an international note, which Stephanie also touched on. But of course, there is tremendous growth and opportunity in the US around plant-based foods, around increasing supply network resiliency. But we, of course, are all players in a global system. And there are not just implications and things for us to be mindful of, but there also are opportunities that will come out of this collaboration. So we recently also launched the International Plant-Based Foods Working Group, where the Plant-Based Foods Association is working in partnership with 7 international trade associations from UK, Europe, Canada, China, and India to come together to align on our global priorities and strategies to advance the plant-based food industry. And I will leave it at that for now, but I'm very much looking forward to the breakout session later today and to connecting with all of you. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks very much to Rachel and to all of our presenters. I'm going to welcome Allison Ryder from CIA up to the stage, and I hope we'll see you all at the breakout session, and we'll get in much more into the nitty-gritty. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that opening general session. And it is now my pleasure to welcome Deena Shanker to the stage. Deena is an accomplished food reporter at Bloomberg who will be moderating our next general session around reimagining consumer engagement strategies to transform American menus. Welcome, Deena.
Hi, thanks for having me here, especially for this panel. So most of us in this room know that reducing our collective meat consumption is important for our individual health, planetary health, worker welfare, animal welfare. The list goes on and on. Yet Americans eat ever more meat. So today we will discuss the steps that chefs, business leaders, and other influential change makers can take to encourage people to reduce that meat consumption and increase their plants. So please welcome first Dr. David Katz. He has focused his career on helping people live healthier lifestyles and on the confluence of human and environmental health. He is the founder and former director of Yale University's Yale Griffin Prevention Research Center, past president of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, and president and founder of the True Health Initiative. He recently co-authored a book with Mark Bittman, How to Eat, and has been a nutrition columnist for the Oprah magazine. I actually have a much longer list, but I'm going to cut it off right there because you guys get the point. He is a smart guy who has spent a lot of time on this. So thank you, Dr. David Katz.
Thank you. Thank you, Deena. Good morning. Nice to be with you all. Quick shout out of thanks to Greg Drescher. Without Greg, I wouldn't be here. And frankly, neither would any of you. And a quick shout out of thanks as well to Allison Ryder for, well, being Allison Ryder. I want to make the case for a No Beef Week, and we're going to cover with this panel a number of initiatives. And what distinguishes this one is that generally a reduction in beef consumption is both cause and effect, action and reaction. The goal is to reduce beef consumption. I want to lay before you the case that we can potentially use a temporary adjustment of beef intake to make a statement to the supply side, where it is the cause and the effect is something quite different. I trust you all know that poor diet quality is killing a lot of us, more than 500,000 Americans prematurely every year. Configured into poor quality diets is animal food centrism. It's certainly not the only problem. Ultra-processed foods are a problem, junk where food ought to be, but it's certainly part of the problem. And it's important to note that the planetary health impacts you've been hearing so much about this morning are not just an indirect existential threat to humanity. They are that. But actually, there are direct adverse health effects of what we're doing to the planet, mediated via such things as changes in the quality of the air we breathe, many other factors. I commend to your attention this excellent book by friend and colleague Sam Myers at Harvard and Dr. Howard Frumkin, Planetary Health, Protecting Nature to Protect Ourselves. That's an important value proposition to add to your list of reflections, that what we do to protect the natural world actually redounds directly to the health of large populations of Homo sapiens all around the world. A few years back, NPR asked me this question: how bad really is red meat? I've heard a lot about it already this morning, but my answer was, well, it depends on the lens. The lens we use changes the view. There are three relevant lenses. First, there are direct human health effects of diets that are predominant in beef or animal food, and there we have a list of concerns and particular indictments. Then there's what we're doing to our fellow creatures, where we have another list of pretty serious concerns and indictments. And then finally, the great imperative of our time, what we're doing to the planet, where we have a very salient list of concerns and indictments, because we're hearing more and more about this. Our diets at the scale of 8 billion hungry Homo sapiens daily are cooking the planet. We all know this. And in particular, for the purposes of this discussion and our panel this morning, we should note that we start with this in places like the Amazon basin. We do this in order to proceed to do this in order to produce this. And this is the particular granular element I want to focus on. We're cutting down pristine rainforest, and you all have heard the many virtues of rainforest, incubator, biodiversity, lungs of the world, all of that. We're raising rainforest so that we may graze cattle to produce the world's hamburgers. You know that beef is off the charts compared to everything else with regard to every important measure of environmental impact, water utilization, land use, intensity of fertilizers to produce the feed for the cattle, and of course, greenhouse gas emissions. So if we were going to focus our efforts on making just one change, it would indeed be reducing global intake of beef. And that's true as well if we want to save one of the great icons of the natural world for future generations. It seems unconscionable to imagine any other outcome. Unconscionable that on our watch there will no longer be an Amazon rainforest. But we're hearing more and more that is very realistic. The Amazon is reaching a tipping point. At some point, you've so disrupted the range of the forest that it loses its regenerative capacity. You can't regrow it. There is that possibility. So we're just about there. So one invokes Malcolm Gladwell and hopes we can collectively tip the right way. But the Amazon is in grave peril. And the single biggest driver of that is global demand for beef. There are other factors. Amazon is being raised, and other rainforests too, by the way, around the world, Indonesia, being cut down, burned down to produce soybeans, but that's mostly as animal feed. So frankly, beef is again complicit in that. In Borneo, it's for palm oil plantations, mostly to produce processed food. But in the Amazon, the single leading driver of deforestation, well, yes, I suppose we could say it's Brazil's crazy president, Bolsonaro. But other than that, looking at the demand side, it's our demand for beef, the global demand for beef. So raising cattle, single biggest driver of deforestation, and especially important in the Amazon. It's a factor in rainforest in Africa and Indonesia as well. But beef, Brazil, loss of rainforest. That trifecta should stick in your mind at the end of this morning's discussion. We have to fix that. So that's what this is all about. And Brazil is a major responder to the global demand for beef. Brazil exports almost twice as much beef as the United States. We may not recognize the magnitude of that. We're such a big economy relatively. They're a much smaller one, but they export twice as much beef. They eat a lot of beef. They're one of the world's leading consumers of beef, but they are the world's leading exporter of beef, catering to the global demand. And what we have to recognize is that ultimately demand prevails over supply. Profits on the supply side dry up if people don't want to buy what they're selling. It changes markets. We may tend to think the supply side is immutable, but ultimately, in our collective righteous might and how we alter our demand, we have total control over the supply side. So this export market is incredibly important because it says the world can ultimately dictate the profit margins for beef produced by cutting down rainforest or burning it down. We have control and we can leverage that. It was fascinating and frankly depressing to me that in the lead up to COP26, when the New York Times had a feature article on its front page about progress we had and had not made since the Paris Accord, where were we in the lead up to COP26, there was no mention in this article of meat, beef, diet, or food. And it's interesting because the talks this morning all seem to highlight the fact that we're all aware of these connections. Consumers are aware of these connections. And yet at the high level of policy, a lot of focus on fossil fuels, but a failure to connect what we, in fact, as individuals can address, what we put on our plates every day, and the collective aggregate influence over critical indicators of planetary health. So it wasn't addressed there. When 200 scientific journals published an open letter simultaneously pleading for world leaders to address the critical crisis of planetary degradation and climate change, the words meat, beef, diet, food did not appear, prompting colleagues and me to write a letter in response, which the BMJ published, noting we appreciate the open letter and the plea, but it has a blind spot and we have to address that. So while all of this is playing out and all of these concerns and indictments, MIT recently did a data analysis, this was published last year, indicating that as a species, we are on track to consume more beef than ever before in history. Total beef intake is going up. So all these promising trends we heard about this morning, great, but if you think it's enough, you're wrong. We need to do more. The overall trend is not in our favor, and that was the impetus for No Beef Week. This was an idea I had, frankly, because I was lying awake at night worrying about the fate of the planet and thinking, what can I do? So we leveraged the resources of the True Health Initiative, which is a global coalition of thought leaders in public health, preventive medicine, lifestyle medicine, sustainability, and socialized this concept that if we all stopped eating beef for a week, if we could engage our communities and networks to do that, we could send a signal to the supply side that we are, as consumers, as the world, committed to severing the link between the global demand for beef and deforestation in the Amazon. Produce beef elsewhere to satisfy a lesser demand, but do not burn down rainforests to do it. We engaged many influential thought leaders, some of whom are well known to this audience: Walter Willett, Christopher Gardner, David Eisenberg, and premier leaders in planetary health and organizations like Amazon Watch, Rainforest Action Network, Greenpeace, Friends of the Earth, and many more. And we launched this in partnership with Health in Harmony, a phenomenal nonprofit committed to advancing access to health care and reforestation around the world. They started in Indonesia. They now work in the Amazon as well. We were not very successful in having the global impact we intended. We had about 1,200 pledges to take the 1 week I won't eat beef challenge, but 24 countries were represented, and this was in the lead up to Earth Day. But I consider this just round one in a relay race. And the results of this are important. We had another partner, the Health Sciences Academy. Appreciation to Alex Rouhani, who led this analysis. Now, with all due respect to Alex, I don't tend to show busy slides. She sent me some busy slides to share. So these will all be eye charts for you, but I'll give you the punchline in each case. First, we had about 1,400 participants in the online survey. So these were not the people who took the pledge. These were people who answered questions about beef consumption, concerns about rainforest, and so forth. We had 84 countries represented. Most people came from the UK or the US. The Health Sciences Academy is headquartered in London, but 84 countries in total, and a very impressive age distribution. So we had all ages. We had about a quarter men, 3/4 women, and fewer than half were health professionals or experts in nutrition, so more than half were not. Most respondents did eat animal foods. 80% of our respondents were omnivores or carnivores. There was a small percentage who said we don't eat any plant foods, but most were omnivores, so it was a good test group. And 7 in 10, so 70% of the omnivores, so 80% were omnivores, 70% of them said beef is included in the mix. That's the punchline here. A lot more information. And by the way, the reason you show busy slides and then don't share all the details is to show you that we did our homework, and also to invite you to ask me for the slide deck for those of you who are interested and want to dig in. But 70% of those include beef, and in many ways, this is really the punchline for the whole presentation. 80% of those who consume beef routinely, some of them every day, said, yes, now that I know there's a link to deforestation in the Amazon, I'd be willing to give it up for a week to make a statement to the supply side that I don't want my hamburger at the price of pristine rainforest. If you can't source it for me better than that, I don't want to eat it. That's powerful. 80% of the routine beef eaters gave that response. And most people eating beef expressed an interest in eating less beef with or without a No Beef Week. So they're willing to make that statement, be part of the global chorus, but there is this widespread interest, at least among these 1,400 respondents, and we hope they're representative of the world, in reducing beef intake because of all the things that are being discussed here this morning. And then we also found, this is the busiest slide of all, but what it means is in the headline here. We found that the greater the awareness of the link between demand for beef and deforestation, the greater the interest in cutting back on personal beef consumption, the greater the willingness to participate in a campaign like No Beef Week, which of course then says to all of us, we must pay it forward. Those of us here this morning are aware. Awareness can be shared. It must be. It's the first step. It's not enough, but it's necessary. So this was the inspiration for No Beef Week. We are taking pristine rainforest and running it through a meat grinder. It's horrible. Has to stop, or we will lose the Amazon rainforest on our watch, and all be left trying to explain to future generations why it is irrevocably gone. So I think the concept is very important. Our impact in round one of this effort was limited, but if we view it just as round one, that's fine. You don't cross the finish line in round one, you just get the race started. And with Greg's kind invitation to be here this morning, I viewed this as an opportunity to pass the baton. Let's do this again. Imagine a global community of culinary leaders saying, we've heard enough to know that lots of our consumers are interested in reducing beef intake. We can show them what they can eat instead. Let's get together and do this for a week. We'll swap out our menus at marquee restaurants around the world for a week and say, 1 week we're featuring a beef-free menu because we want to help sever the link between the global demand for what Homo sapiens eat and what we're doing to this beautiful planet, which is the only home we will ever share. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Katz. We are also welcoming Daphne Altema-Johnson, the Program Officer for Food Communities and Public Health at the Johns Hopkins Center for a Livable Future. Thank you so much. And Brian Cateman, Executive Director of the Reducitarian Foundation. So let's take a quick look. Oh, first, let him onto the stage. And now we'll take a quick look at a trailer for his documentary, Meet Me Halfway.
One of the reasons why I wanted to make this documentary is that I'm confused. I'm confused why it's so difficult to get people to eat less meat.
One of the first things anybody who starts to actually scratch the surface of the food system realizes is that this is really not a happy picture at all. I mean, we're kind of trapped in a food system that is very, very bad for us.
No meat. What if no one ate meat? They produce less animals, then the temperature would change.
So what happens when people that you really love and care about just don't see this issue? Do you dismiss them?
Food is emotional. If I don't eat, eggs, that means I can't have, the cookies that my grandma used to make when we were little.
People like eating meat. So it's not just a matter of, oh, I hear information and then I go make a change.
No one is saying, hey, Johnny, you got an A, so I'm gonna give you some broccoli.
Nobody enjoys the concept of less. So when you say to someone, I want you to eat less meat, they instantly feel somewhat hostile and sad.
Well, I think you can eat a perfectly adequate diet and never eat meat at all. I don't see anything wrong with that.
The food that we create has to invite people, entice people, inspire people to eat a better diet.
It tastes just like chicken.
Yeah. What do you eat? I never heard of avocado.
Have you ever had an avocado?
No.
Have you ever had an avocado?
One thing that I didn't get from the trailer, but when I watched the documentary I saw was that those are Brian's parents, actually,
Yes.
So whose fault is it really that they've never eaten an avocado? I don't know. Brian's documentary starts with this question that I don't think really found a definitive answer, and maybe there isn't one, but I'd like to just briefly get opinions from the three of you. Why is it so hard? Why don't people simply eat less meat, even people that know they should?
Sure.
Please, yeah.
Well, thank you. For context, I grew up in Staten Island, New York. How many of you have been to Staten Island before? Yeah, did you do more than ride the ferry back and forth? I don't believe you. I come at this question from a very humble perspective because, growing up in Staten Island, you see my parents. I basically ate Burger King and McDonald's and KFC 24/7. I mean, sincerely, that was my diet. And I came to the conclusion when I started thinking about this issue that I knew some people who were advocating for a vegan diet. And it's arguably the most moral. It's certainly the most environmentally friendly. But it felt sort of divorced from reality because the people I knew in Staten Island were not going to go vegan. My parents were not going to do that. And so I thought, well, if we just told people to eat less meat, that would be enough. I mean, if we moved past this kind of all or nothing framing, that would move the needle. And what I quickly realized is that's not true. Simply telling someone to do anything is not enough. And so the documentary starts off with this question: why is it so difficult to get people to eat less meat? And the answer is there's a ton of reasons. I mean, it's our culture, there's politics, there's interpretation of religion, but at its core, people choose meat based on price, taste, and convenience. Those are the three reasons, and that's come up a number of times throughout the sessions here. And so, meat tastes really good. It's super cheap because of how we raise animals for food in these factory farms. And it's convenient. It's literally everywhere, and it's a bedrock of fast food restaurants. So that's my interpretation for why we eat as much meat as we do. And to be clear, it was 226 pounds of meat per person in 2021. That's how much meat was consumed. And it was 225 in 2020. So to your point, the trend is going in the opposite direction, despite some of our enthusiasm for some of the progress we're seeing in other ways.
Yeah, I think so too. I agree. The taste is a big thing, taste and preference. I mean, I can't tell you, I have friends who will call me. He said, Daphne, you have to try this brand because of plant-based chicken, because the texture and consistency is just like chicken. But most importantly, though, some people don't feel like they have to, right? They feel like they have a need. You need meat for health. You need meat to grow. You need meat for strength. Like, it's just, there's not really that, unless you're told by your physician that you need to do this. And they may still be pissed, right? Because you're telling them, obviously telling if you want someone to do something, don't tell them to do something, right? And so they get quite upset, but eventually they will do it. But a lot of people too, and let's not be naive about it, they don't really know about the environmental impact. You'll be surprised. And in some countries, specifically low middle income countries, it's the significance of wealth, right? If I invite you over to my house, you see this like nice spread, it's significant what you have. It's important. And I don't think, and people are more comfortable too. We have to think about, when we think about meat, people are generally more comfortable preparing a meal where meat, that's what we've been taught. As you said, with your family, that's what we know. And so with Meatless Monday, I do know when we ask our consumers, that receive our newsletters or that works with us, what do you want more of? They want more recipes because they generally don't know how to prepare plant-based dishes. And it's to the point now they'll ask, well, can you provide us with an ingredient list of what to buy ahead of time so when we go to the store, we can actually know what to purchase. It's just, you don't know. When you know better, you do better. And sometimes you just don't want to do better, right? Yeah, you know what I mean? Yeah.
So if memory serves me correctly, Brian, I say something much like this in your wonderful movie. I have a 5-part answer. So you asked the question, why is it hard to get people to eat less meat? Cultural norms, familiarity, and aspiration. Those are the easy ones. Yeah. The hard ones are 6 million years of evolutionary biology and 15,000 years of human civilization. So what I mean is, it's normal in our culture to eat a lot of meat, and we built up to the point where that was accessible to the masses, and it's always hard to turn the Titanic around. Changing cultural norms is hard, takes time. You need to replace them with different cultural norms. I think we're involved in that process, but we shouldn't expect it to be easy or quick. One of the most potent drivers of taste preference is familiarity. We're talking about meat tasting good, but that's only to people who eat meat routinely. I haven't eaten meat in 45 years. I don't like the smell, I don't like the look, I want no part of it, right? It doesn't taste good to me because it's not on the menu at all. If you get familiar with other flavors, you actually learn to have different preferences. And then aspiration. Throughout most of human history, meat was accessible to the affluent and was elusive to the indigent. So it was something people aspired to. Your diet was better, your life was better when you could afford to include meat in your diet. And again, that's a cultural element that's hard to overthrow. 6 million years of evolutionary biology, we differentiated ourselves from other primates with our ability to function together cohesively, which made us effective hunters, which made meat a part of the diet. So it was sort of an evolutionary step. What was chicken, what was egg? Bad metaphor, I suppose. But in our advance, whether meat eating helped grow our brains and made us more successful hunters or vice versa, nobody seems to know. But clearly, the inclusion of more meat in the Homo sapien diet was an evolutionary step. Probably hard to reverse engineer those. And then ever since the dawn of agriculture, we have been increasingly democratizing access to these elements in our diet. So a lot of inertia working against it. Not insurmountable, but your question was, why is it hard? We shouldn't expect it to be easy.
Well then, what have each of you found? Daphne, you mentioned recipes. What is the most effective tool that you guys have found in getting individuals to reduce their meat intake?
I'll say, again, small changes, allow people to make further changes. I think some research, we know with some research we've done with Meatless Monday, people who've done meatless days, in whichever form, they go on to try to do meat on other days of the week. They go to restaurants and want to ask about it as well, or they make further changes. But most importantly, if we must go, what just happened recently, personally, it's a personal decision, right? And it's health. And when you look at COVID-19 and what it did to people of color, right? And what it did to Native Americans. And when you look at that, and now, I get called, people ask, like, why are a lot of, brown people, black people are going, vegan? The simple reason is when you realize your family, or, you're dying, you get older, you care about your health, you want to live longer, right? And so there is that aspect of it. I think that's very important. But I also think, too, honestly, eating plant-based at this day and time, it's trendy. It's trendy for you to go to Slutty Vegan and take a picture and just put it on TikTok and say, hey, look at me, I did this, right? And that's what we know, that's work. The influencers, the people that are out there that are saying, no, you don't have to just eat, roughage or just pasta with olive oil. You can actually still have your flavors, your cultural flavors. You can still have your Cajun seasoning. It's just like we have to really change the way we think about food and how a family, quite frankly, I've tried so many dishes because my cousin is vegan, and I find myself, he's comfortable eating plant-based food, so therefore I'm trying more things, and I'm recommending it to my family. Can't get my daughter to do it, though, but, my son, definitely he's open to it. So I think we know that small changes do work, and I think, that's what we got to continue to do.
I always think of my mom on this front because I got married a couple of years ago, right before the pandemic, and my wife and I don't identify as vegan, but we decided that we were only going to serve vegan food at our wedding. And when I told my mom that, I could feel the tension building in her body. And she said to me something very insightful. She said, what are the people who don't eat that kind of food going to eat? And sometimes when I order a vegan meal at a restaurant, and I'm a friendly guy, the waiter or waitress will make conversation with me, and they'll be like, oh, are you vegan? And I always want to reply like no, I just wanted a vegan meal this moment. And so part of the problem is that a lot of people still think vegan food is only for vegans. And again, education is not going to solve the problem alone, but until we get to a place where someone can enjoy having guacamole and margaritas and know that those are vegan, and that you can enjoy lots of vegan food and it'd be good for the planet and animals and so on, that's going to be a big part of the solution for sure.
And I think you are an indelible part of the solution. You're all here at Menus of Change. I'm looking at the masthead, the business of healthy, sustainable, delicious food choices, with this very strong emphasis on reducing beef intake. So I think really the answer is, first of all, everything we've done to date isn't enough. So as we gauge what works, we have to say we don't know, because we haven't found it yet, right? All of these elements of a comprehensive solution, but we haven't done enough yet. So we can answer that question, Deena, at some point in the future when we cross the finish line. But I think fundamentally the formula, and everybody here I think is involved in it, is conjoining the why. So that's awareness, all these critically important reasons, with the how. And the how is personal. Right? How do I do that because I like meat? Well, we have alternatives that taste like meat. That may be the answer. How do I do that when I don't want to be vegan? You don't have to be vegan. You can still eat more plants. How do I do that when I'm not used to eating that way? Well, you can go through taste bud rehab and learn to love foods that love you and the planet back and all of that. So I think we all need to become how specialists and then carry the banner of the why. There are many elements to the why. And of course, we have new tools. I spoke yesterday briefly at my company, Diet ID, which is about assessing and improving diet for health. We've leveraged the intellectual property we have, which is a comprehensive diet map, to gauge change in environmental impact of diets. And this includes ethnic diets. And so somebody could say, I don't want to be vegan, but I'd love to reduce the environmental footprint of my diet. Show me how to do that in ways that I'm willing to eat. Well, we'll be able to answer that question and quantify it before the year is out. So I think we need to be creative and think, where are people now? I think some of Brian's comments and yours, Daphne, are very responsive to that imperative. Meet them there. And rather than doing karate, you must eat beef or I will knock you to the floor, do judo. Bend with the prevailing forces. What is it you need? Okay, I can go in that direction. And the next thing you know, they're eating more plants and less meat.
That is very important. That is a very important point. Meet them there. And the labels don't work.
Per the name of this
Yeah.
great movie, Meet Me Halfway.
Yeah,
It's a great title.
Yeah, it's good, yeah.
You know, Brian, actually, I also had a meatless wedding, and it was similarly controversial. It was not vegan, but it was meatless, and I got some tidbits of overheard conversations afterwards from my friends from the wedding.
Did they like the food?
People. It wasn't that they didn't like it. The food was great. I only wish I'd eaten more of it, but.
Nobody eats at their wedding.
People were just surprised.
Yeah, nobody eats at their own wedding.
Yeah. People, my husband's family is Syrian. They're big meat eaters. So there was a lot of explanation that this was the bride's, this came from the bride.
And you know, it's great you guys did that. It's rarely seen at professional conferences. And in fact, the American College of Cardiology is notorious for serving horrible food. But it can be done. American College of Lifestyle Medicine routinely caters a vegan menu, but it's cuisines of the world. And they present it with the recipe. So the idea is, learn how to cook things you don't know how to cook. And it's not, try not to proselytize. That's the worry, right?
Yeah.
But the food is fantastic. It really can be great. It can be a learning experience. And maybe that's the way to pitch this. This is not how you're eating all the time. It's an opportunity to learn about some other things you might like to eat a bit more often. But anyway, good for you guys.
It actually brings me to my next question, which is, individual change is great and important, but institutional change is better and more important, I would say. So what should we be asking of our institutions? Which institutions do we get to make those asks of? Sure, if we're hosting weddings, we have a lot of control, but what about running conferences, just attending conferences, being an academic on a faculty? What are the asks that we can make, and what are the ways to present that to the decision makers that will get you the answer that you are looking for?
I mean, for me, it always comes back to price, taste, and convenience, right? And so if you're in a powerful position to influence what people eat, I mean, you have to make sure the food tastes really good, and it has to be affordable. I mean, if it can be 50 cents or $1 less than the meat option, that's great. I also think, and maybe this is a hot take, you don't want to take the health too far, because part of what you alluded to is my parents' taste buds are shot. I mean, they've been eating fast food all their life. So if you put some broccoli and kale and it doesn't have a decent amount of salt and sugar and fat in it, it's just going to taste terrible to them. And so sometimes I actually think health practitioners can almost overdo it because they're so excited about making this food really healthy. I spoke with a woman yesterday who works at a hospital, and she's in charge of some of the decision making. And she said something that, her name is Dawn, in case she's in the room, and she said that something that she found to be successful is that they actually will provide samples to folks that are in the hospital and the cafeteria, and there's nothing less expensive than free, right? So if you can get past that first barrier, they try it, and then they like it, maybe that's. I find, again, it's all about speaking less. I just go over to my parents' house and try to bring them vegan food. I don't talk about it. If you can just try to, create situations where people are incentivized without making a big thing of it to have it, I think that's a big part of the solution.
Yeah, I agree to that extent too. I know, so sometimes we worked with, at that point, Bon Appetit for Meatless Monday in institutions. And what the chef did, he was really excited about making vegetarian and vegan meals tasty. Trust me, if you make food taste good, the meat is not as important, right? But going back to labeling, if we have a big banner that says Meatless Monday, you can forget about it. But if you put, in retail space, if you arrange your food in a way that they have access to it, you don't make a big deal, and labeling caramelized, glazed carrots or something like that, that actually, they will try that. There is nowhere in there is vegan, vegetarian, or anything. You just name the item. And you'll be surprised how many, your consumers will actually, take heed to that. They will try it. And so that's the role I feel like institutions play. But as far as conferences like this where we are, and I think as you said, Dr. Katz, is that the data is there. We know what to do. We just got to make a commitment as institutions, make a commitment, to animal welfare, sustainability. Like, we have to change this because it's quite obvious that we cannot continue the way we're eating and producing meat with the pandemic we have with obesity, with how many people are dying. I mean, again, bringing back to COVID, it was like eye-opening. Like, we can't continue. So those are the roles that institutions, have to play. Consumers will try it. I mean, as far as mandates, sometimes you got to go there, right? You have to go there so they can try it. But there's a way, and we have to figure that out.
So you asked about institutions, Deena. So two quick comments. One, I think, first of all institutions need to be involved. Right? We're talking about saving the planet. We really are. It's an existential crisis. But two quick thoughts. One, we need help from our friends in the media. Famous scene in The Game Changers where Arnold refers back to a scene in a movie he did with Sylvester Stallone and said, "You hit like a vegetarian." And so, we basically need Captain America to come out as vegan or something, right? I mean, we need to show that that's okay. And then I think about Disney movies, Gaston. When I was a lad, I ate 4 dozen eggs every morning to help me get large. And now that I'm grown, I eat 5 dozen eggs, right? So, Gaston should have gotten beefy on something other than beef and eggs. So, we need some help there. But I'm here on a mission. So I would say the institution I'm interested in is you. I'm hoping the next round of the global 1-week no beef challenge emanates from the culinary world. That we can make this delicious. We can take beef off our menus for a week. And we can highlight the importance of doing this for planetary health. And we're going to feature alternatives to beef that even our beef-loving customers are going to love. Yeah. Learn to eat different things. We'll show you how delicious it can be. But I think the culinary community is the best. I mean, that's what I love about what the CIA does in Menus of Change. It's a phenomenal institution-level change that we are obviously committed to service, making the customer happy and satisfied and delicious. And yet, we've got to do good while we're doing well in our business. And so I think collectively you have a tremendous influence, which is an opportunity, and one more superhero in the mix, Spider-Man, or really Spider-Man's Uncle Ben. You have great power. I think you've got great responsibility to leverage it accordingly. Yeah. I suspect I'm preaching to the chorus. That's why you're here.
So I also want to ask about plant-based meat and how we should think about the role of this new category, especially because when we talk about price, it's more expensive than meat. A few years ago, the excitement about plant-based meat was palpable, and it was everywhere, it felt like. Now sales have mostly flatlined as consumers question the health claims around a lot of these products, and there's also a lot of products that really don't taste very good, so people reject them on that basis as well. How do you guys see these products? How are you finding that institutions view them? Is it a simple replacement or maybe not so simple? And what do you see the role of these products in 10 years from now?
Well, first of all, you're right. I mean, plant-based meat is I've heard the word boom and trend, but it is the reality. And I hate this because I want plant-based meat to be 100%, right? Plant-based meat is about 1% of the market. So we're talking about a small fraction and the trend is good, but it's not moving fast enough. And as you said, it's slowing down in some ways. Plant-based meat is really important because, like I said, a lot of consumers don't want to have kale and broccoli, but if they can have the experience of eating what is a facsimile of an animal-based meat, but is either marginally healthier, is going to have a significantly lighter environmental footprint, is not going to involve tremendous animal cruelty. That's a really big win. And again, so that may be a hot take. Some companies are moving in the direction of lowering the amounts of fat and lowering the amount of salt, making it less desirable for consumers because, again, and relatively more consumers care about taste than health. That's a sad reality. The setting matters. I think let's get delicious plant-based meats in places, fast food restaurants and so on, where consumers are not necessarily opting in for super healthy items. But yeah, it is a real challenge. And I think there's a lot of, as you heard from the Good Food Institute and the Plant-Based Foods Association, there's a lot of investment being poured into these products. And we may see in the coming years that there are significant improvements, both in terms of scaling those products, decreasing the price, making the taste and texture better. And it's a bet that we should make. We absolutely should make this bet. We need to see this through. I don't care, even if it fails, we have to try because of everything that's at stake. It's well worth it. But it remains to be seen what will happen. And I think it's important for us to have that level of respect for the data and the humility.
As a dietitian, I feel like they have a purpose, right? I see them more as a transition for meat eaters. They are just that, right? People are just, you're not going to get people, just sudden changes don't happen. So that's, for me, that's their purpose. Are they as healthy? No. Are they better than than what I would, or, my colleagues would recommend, which is, whole foods, legumes, lentils, and so on, and tofu. No, it's not better. In some cases, they are worse, right? But that is where they fit. That is their role. And as institutions, sometimes when they have mandates, it's easier for them to do, right? They can just go and grab it. And it's easy. I fulfill my, less carbon, environmental, done. So that's the role I feel like that they play. Eventually, as Brian stated, I do think, 10 years from now, it's not going to be okay to, the quality is not that great. So you want healthier, better quality meat and more affordable.
I call them sometimes like a gateway drug to beef.
Yeah,
and tofu.
exactly.
And that I do too. And I think that's an important comment because yes, they're a small part of the market, but first of all, it's a new market. Secondly, who's it for? People who love eating plants. So it's not for me. Nope. I really actually like beans and lentils, right? And I don't want anything I eat to bleed. So it's not for me. It's for people who are plant curious, right? I mean, basically, I really like to eat meat, but I'm willing to flirt with an alternative if it satisfies me. So you would expect the market niche to be small at first, and then ultimately for it to evolve and supplant meat, which we hope it does. I think there were very insightful comments this morning about the opportunity to combine industry innovations. So using fermentation, cell culture, and technologies to replace meat with plant derivatives, combine those and create products that satisfy the palates of more and more people. But I do want to state categorically I'm a fan, whether or not these are part of my personal diet. I don't need them, but I'm a fan because there are three key considerations. What are the direct human health effects? Jury may be out there relative to the current alternatives. What are the effects on our fellow creatures? Decisively good. What are the effects on total planetary impact? Decisively good. And so the current final word on the topic of plant-based meat is, ironically, courtesy of a guy named Meatloaf. 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
Great. Well, thank you. I think we're out of time. But I could just stay here and chat until someone gets me off the stage. But I don't know, do we?
But I think, Deena, too.
Say goodnight, Gracie.
Say goodnight. But what we know, like Taco Bell now just is offering like one of those like plant-based like alternatives.
Oh, they did a limited time offer.
Yeah. And I know Starbucks is offering a sandwich. And if you can get someone to try it and it tastes somewhat good, they'll come back. And maybe they'll bring their friends. And that's what that's their purpose. Environmentally it works. But it would be nice though if we can get to a point where we're talking about the nutrition, the diet, and the climate, and we see it as a whole, as opposed to just doing this little thing in silos.
Are we maybe just putting too much expectation on the plant-based and other meat replacement categories? I mean, when we talk about like a cell-cultured meat or even a fusion of a cell-cultured fat into the plant-based meat and all of the different varieties that are discussed by these still relatively young companies. I mean, we're talking about even the plant-based category, which is really now an established supermarket category, they still are struggling to scale products. And so when we talk about something like a cell cultured meat, I mean, that is way out in the future. And I personally worry sometimes that there's a little bit too much expectation being put in something that isn't really a solution right now when we need it.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends what you mean by expectation, right? I mean, if you look at the amount of money being poured in, it's really relatively small compared to other technologies that have, if you look at electric cars or something like that. So it's great that there's so much investment, but I think it's still early. The media places a lot of emphasis on it. It's a very popular topic, and I'm guilty of this because I love these technologies and write about these options a lot. But yeah, we need to be focused on education and policy. But here's the thing. All of these strategies have pros and cons, right? I mean, if you're excited about making changes to government, I mean, I don't know a lot of young people that feel super optimistic about that right now for understandable reasons. If you look at education, you should hang out with me and my parents and try having, intellectual conversations with them. It can be hard. Yeah. So all of these solutions have pros and cons, and we could rip apart each and every one of them. And my take is that we have to be humble about the fact that we don't know what is going to work, and we just need a million more of us and you all to do their darn best to try to advance what I think is a shared mission for a more sustainable, healthy, and compassionate world.
All right, I'm going to do one quick fire question before I get kicked off, if that's okay. All right, so if everyone out here could go home and make one change that was not a change toward their personal consumption habits, because we all know about that one, what is the change that people could make as individuals to affect bigger systemic institutional change?
Ooh, it's a tough one. You saved the hardest one for last.
Yeah. I'll start because it's easy for me. If we're not talking about our personal consumption, I would say wave the flag I carried into the room this morning. I think a lot of people simply don't know that eating steak or hamburgers has anything to do with a crazy president in Brazil burning down the world's most majestic rainforest, but it does. So pay that forward. Did you know that us eating hamburgers routinely has something to do with the loss of the Amazon rainforest? We all actually have a voice in that. Raise that awareness.
Great.
You took it from me. I think you remember. Education. I think people don't know what they don't know. But most importantly, I like stories. If I took anything from today and from yesterday, I think Matthew. He was telling the story, and it was very impactful to hear his perspective. So I think that's what I can take. Like, did you know you can do this? And the whole aspect is like, let's try to grow a tomato. Let's see how much you have to do it. And I think that itself within it is like education. It's like you can talk about soil health. There's so much you can talk about. Yeah, I think that's what I'll pass on.
I guess I'll drive the price, taste, convenience thing again. It's just whatever your position is, if you have the ability to put a delicious, affordable, convenient plant-based option in front of someone, whether it's in your home or on a menu or in any institution, that's going to be ultimately even more than the signage about the health and the environmental issues and the animal welfare. If you could just get those three metrics in front of consumers, I think that's really going to help in a significant way. And I would thank you for doing that.
Yeah,
great.
Thank you, Deena.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Allison.
Thank you so much. I agree that I don't know about you all, but I just could listen to that conversation, and hopefully you will join them in a continued conversation in their breakout. For me personally, just one quick comment for me, because I started my career working to support the Meatless Monday campaign, which is really one of the original meat reduction campaigns, and it's still so exciting to see it celebrating 20 years, right? Next year, celebrating 20 years. And even with continued, some pushback with how it's been rolled out in different areas, it's still stuck around. And I think that some of the research and the data, and now seeing the evolution of other campaigns and language, like what Dr. Katz is doing, and like what Brian Cateman's doing, and like what was recently rolled out in New York City schools with the Plant-Powered Fridays. So I think this issue around language and messaging and campaigns and how we get consumers engaged is just endlessly fascinating. So I hope that that will be part of the thread of your discussions throughout your time here. So thank you again for that fantastic panel. So just a few Transition notes from me here as we look to what's ahead. So just remember to keep using the app to access all the great content we have for you and to engage with the polls for your chance to win a free registration to next year's Menus of Change. And more resources will be made available on the MOC website. Here's a snapshot of what's ahead for you for the day, because we're going to be going into a short break and then into our first round of breakout sessions. So more on that in a second, but just to give you a heads up on how lunch will work, at 12 p.m., we'll have bento box lunches ready for you to pick up right outside in the plaza area. And if you pre-selected an alternative gluten-free or vegan or allergen-free lunch, just check in with one of our team members as you're picking up your lunch. And then you can feel free to enjoy your lunch outside or in the lower level of this building or in our main building in Farquharson Hall in the cafeteria area. If you haven't been in that building, it's absolutely stunning. So I definitely encourage you to check out if you want to get inside from the summer heat. We'll have some frozen desserts from Oatly on the lower level after lunch for our networking break at 12:45. And David Katz and Brian Cateman will be signing their books during that break at 12:45 as well. So before lunch, we'll go into this networking and refreshment break downstairs on the lower level, and then your breakout sessions will start at 10:45. Your pre-selected breakout sessions are on the back of your badge. So here is also just a quick map to orient you a bit so you get a sense of where you're going. This campus can be a little large and overwhelming. If you are an A1, you're going to go to Danny K Theater, which is out the main door, head to your left and go towards the library. If you're in A2, you'll go to the admissions building, also out the door to your left. It's just around the corner from that beautiful sculpture of a sturgeon made out of used cutlery. If you haven't seen it, it's really cool to look at. And if you're in A3 or A4, you'll be back in this building in the lower level classrooms. So if you need help finding anything, just ask. We'll have CI staff members around campus that can help direct you to where you need to be. Let me go back here. So I think that's all you have. Enjoy the refreshment and networking break sponsored by Alaska Seafood Marketing Institute, and we'll see you back here at 1:15 for our next round of general sessions. Thank you.
If you like the delicate flavors of smoked salmon, you'll love this cold smoked salmon salad with grilled persimmons, arugula, and lemon maple vinaigrette. The marinade in this recipe produces a slightly sweet smoked salmon with a candy-like texture that's similar to jerky. For the candied salmon, combine the sugar and salt. Place the sugar mixture in a 1/4-inch thick layer in a pan just large enough to hold our Aqua Bounty salmon in a single layer with a little space between each piece. Place the pieces of the salmon in a container, leaving a 1/4-inch space in between each piece. Pour the remaining sugar mixture over the salmon to coat. Cover and let cure in the refrigerator for 24 hours. Remove the salmon from the cure and place it on a baking sheet with a wire rack on it. Place the salmon uncovered in the refrigerator by the fan for 4 to 6 hours. This is to form a pellicle or a skin, which allows the smoke to better adhere to the surface of the fish when smoking. Set up a 175-degree Fahrenheit smoker. Place the salmon on the rack in the smoker and smoke for 15 minutes or until the salmon is cooked through and has achieved the desired smoke level. Brush the salmon with maple syrup during the smoking process. Let cool. For the lemon maple vinaigrette, combine the lemon, maple syrup, and mustard in a bowl. Whisk in the olive oil and season with salt and pepper. For the grilled persimmons, preheat a grill over medium-high heat. Toss the peeled and cut persimmon wedges with olive oil and place on the grill. Grill on both sides until nicely charred but still crisp. Let these come to room temperature. Combine the arugula, frisee, endive, and chives in a bowl. Add the persimmons and drizzle with the vinaigrette. Season with salt and pepper. Plate the salad, topping with the candied salmon broken into large chunks and toasted nuts. And there you have it, our finished smoked salmon salad with grilled persimmons, arugula, and lemon maple vinaigrette. Delicious. Here's a delicious, easy-to-prepare salmon dish inspired by the healthy cooking of Vietnam. The sweet flavors and delicate texture of the Aqua Bounty salmon in this recipe is perfectly complemented with fresh cucumbers, crispy fried shallots, and aromatic basil. We'll start by making the ginger lime nuoc cham sauce. Place the garlic, chilies, ginger, and sugar in a mortar and pound into a paste. Add the fish sauce, lime juice, and water. Allow this sauce to rest for 15 minutes before serving. You can make these cucumber and carrot noodles using a spiralizer or a vegetable peeler like I've done here. Toss the cucumbers and carrots with cilantro, mint, Thai basil, and green onions, and set this aside while we prepare our salmon. Make sure that the skin side of the Aqua Bounty salmon is completely dry, patting it with paper towels. Season with salt and pepper. Next, heat a sauté pan over medium heat. When the oil is shimmering, add the salmon skin side down. Here, I'm basting with the oil accumulating in the bottom of the pan. Let the salmon cook for a few minutes over medium-high heat to crisp the skin. Once the skin is crisp, turn the salmon and cook for 1 minute on the other side or until the fish is cooked to desired doneness. Now we'll plate our dish. Place a portion of the cucumber mixture in the center of the bowl. Drizzle with several spoonfuls of the ginger lime nuoc cham. Place a portion of the salmon on top of the cucumbers and garnish with herbs, fried shallots, and salmon roe. Here you are, crispy Vietnamese salmon with an herb salad. Enjoy. Crispy on the outside and gooey and creamy on the inside, these vegan-friendly mac and cheese bites with red-hot cream cheese dipping sauce are a fun and delicious shared appetizer. And because they're made with animal-free Perfect Day cream cheese and milk, they're better for the planet, too. We'll start by making the vegan-friendly cheese sauce. To make our sauce thick, make a roux by melting vegan butter in a small pan. Stir in some flour and cook over medium heat, stirring for 1 minute. Set this aside. In a medium saucepan, heat the Perfect Day milk with the garlic and thyme until it begins to scald. At that point, turn the heat to low and allow the flavors to infuse for 5 minutes. Remove the garlic and thyme from the milk and bring the milk to a simmer. Add your roux by teaspoons, whisking as you add. Cook until the mixture is nice and thick. Add the vegan cheddar shreds to the sauce while it's still hot. Stir in the Perfect Day cream cheese. Whisk until smooth and season to taste with nutmeg, salt, and black pepper. Add the cheese sauce to the cooked pasta and gently stir. You could stop here and enjoy some delicious, sustainable mac and cheese. Or you can continue on to make the planet-friendly mac and cheese balls. Once cooled, form the mac and cheese into little balls. Each one should be around 25 to 50 grams, depending on your preference. Next, prepare the breading station. In our first bowl, we have flour. In the second bowl, we have a mixture of Perfect Day cream cheese and Perfect Day milk. In bowl number 3, we have panko or breadcrumbs. Roll each mac and cheese ball in flour and shake off any excess. Next, dip the ball into the cream cheese mixture and finally into the breadcrumbs. Lightly pack each ball between your 2 hands to make sure they're well coated. Refrigerate the breaded mac and cheese balls for 20 minutes. While those chill, we'll make our red-hot dipping sauce. Whisk the Perfect Day cream cheese while drizzling in the Perfect Day milk. Add the hot sauce gradually, tasting as you go. You can always add more, but you cannot take it out. Use your favorite hot sauce, gochujang or sriracha. Add lemon juice to taste, herbs, and salt. When you're ready to serve, heat frying oil to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. Deep fry the bites in batches until they're golden brown and crispy. Drain on a rack and serve immediately, garnished with chives and the red-hot dipping sauce. What could possibly be better than mac and cheese? Mac and cheese made sustainably. Kids and adults alike will love these tasty appetizers and can feel good about devouring them. Crispy, warm, and cheesy, these savory blintzes topped with horseradish cream and vegan caviar are not only delicious, they're made more sustainable with Perfect Day's animal-free cream cheese. To start, we'll make our crepes. In a blender, add the cold Perfect Day milk and water. Add the Perfect Day egg replacer, flour, cornstarch, sugar, salt, and melted vegan butter, and blend on high. Make the crepes in a non-stick pan, stacking as you go directly on top of each other, and set them aside. Now we'll make the potato filling. In a bowl, gently crush boiled and peeled potatoes with a fork. Add caramelized onions, Perfect Day cream cheese, celery, dill, and green onions. Season to taste with salt and pepper and set this aside. Now we're ready to make the blintzes. Place a scoop of potato mixture, about 45 grams, on a crepe. Fold the two sides of the crepe over the filling, then fold the bottom of the crepe over the filling and roll gently to create a tight packet, just like a burrito. We're pairing our blintzes with horseradish cream. Let me show you how to make it. Whisk the Perfect Day cream cheese, slowly adding the Perfect Day milk to achieve a saucy consistency. Add the horseradish and season to taste with salt and pepper. Set it aside. To finish the dish, heat the vegan butter in a non-stick pan until it's foaming. Pan-sear the blintzes until the crepe is golden brown on all sides. To serve, spoon about 2 tablespoons of the horseradish cream on a plate and top with the blintz. Top each blintz with a spoonful of vegan seaweed caviar and microgreens and serve warm. These savory blintzes are delicious for any meal of the day. You can feel great about eating them.
This hearty and delicious roasted zucchini and kale salad with chickpeas and tahini yogurt is inspired by the flavors of North Africa. Zucchini is a type of kabocha squash that is similar to chestnut in sweetness and has a cake-like texture. It pairs well with the warming spices of this dish. We'll start by preparing the different parts of this dish. To make the tahini yogurt sauce, combine the tahini, yogurt, lemon juice, garlic, cumin, and water in a food processor. Process it until it has a smooth consistency. Then slowly pour in the extra virgin olive oil to emulsify. Season to taste with salt and pepper and set aside. Next, we'll make the harissa vinaigrette. Mix together harissa, lemon juice, and extra virgin olive oil. Season with salt and pepper and set this aside too. Now for the zucchini. Toss the cubed zucchini with olive oil, salt, and pepper. Roast the zucchini on a baking sheet in a 400-degree oven until golden brown and tender, approximately 20 minutes. Toss the warm zucchini with harissa vinaigrette and set this aside. Here I have a bowl of kale that's been massaged to give it tenderness. Add the chickpeas, red onions, cherry tomatoes, and toss with a spoonful of harissa vinaigrette. Gently combine the zucchini and adjust the seasoning to taste. To serve, smear the tahini yogurt on a platter and place the zucchini and kale salad on top. You'll love this hearty and healthy dish.